Alright, we're back. We are COMP305 in the fall 2019 semester at Centennial, and we are week 4, part 2 of our broadcast, and we want to talk about WebGL builds a little bit for your mail pilot projects. I'm going to bring up Unity Hub, and let's bring up 2B. Alright, so we're last we left off, we kind of talked about how to, kind of run the game. We had like a main scene, or a start scene, a main scene, and a game over scene. And we can kind of restart that scene. Yay. Yay is right. But what about if you want to make a build? We talked about this briefly before, but let's do it again. So notice that we kind of prepared for this already. So we go to File, Build Settings. And then under File, Build Settings, notice that I've switched on to WebGL Build. So typically you're like something like this. Normally you'd be here on PC, Mac, and Linux Build. That's your default. You want to click WebGL Build and then click Switch Platform. Now I'm over yet WebGL Build, so you should be good. Remember that for your assignment 1, I'm looking for a WebGL build. So what that means is that I can double click on your project, make it work, right? That's what I'm looking at. There'll be an index.html that I'm going to be clicking on. And then you're also going to provide me with a link to your project on GitHub, as well as a very simplified game design document. Some people ask, can I use the same logo as my team? Yes, you can, as long as it's just something like by Tom. So here's my team logo by Tom, right? So whatever your name is, so that way you can kind of say this is your version of assignment 1. Now I'm going to click build and run, and typically when we build we decide where to go. So if I click build, it's going to ask me for the builds folder. I'm going to go to builds, I call it builds, and inside here I'm going to click select folder, and then I'm going to click build and run when we're done. So this build, what it does, it creates your WebGL build, and it stores it inside the builds folder. Now remember, this can take a while. So on a test, or in your, just before you're going to hand in your assignment number 1, this can take a while. And I highly recommend, don't wait to do it at the last minute. Build earlier, right? Remember that I'm going to take your build as a zip file. So you're going to zip it up for me and put it up on eCentennial. It can be quite large, potentially. But what Unity does is it strips out any other assets you haven't used in your application. It only includes the assets that you need in your build, okay, or that you're showing in your scenes. Now I have 3 scenes, so all the the assets from those 3 scenes, any changes that I've made from any of those scenes are going to be added into the build. Okay, there's different kinds of builds you can make. You can make a PC build, a WebGL build, a build for iOS or Android devices if you had something like that. If you have the license, you can do a PS4 build, tvOS builds, and so on. There's like tons and tons of them here. I think last count, Unity had something like 20 different platforms that it can build for, and they're adding new ones all the time, right? So I think this is really good. The other thing that Unity does really well is it deploys to different devices, for example, like VR devices. Recently I've been working on some VR applications, and this works well when you're working with Unity and, let's say, something like the Oculus Go, or the Oculus Quest, or the Oculus Rift S, or it could be on the Vive, the HTC Vive, the old one. I'm waiting to get the Vive Cosmos. It's coming, so I'm going to try that out as well. So kind of a something I'm looking at. So I've been working on some of these VR devices, and Unity is one of the most popular frameworks, if you will, or game engines to use to build VR games. So lots of builds here. Now I'm wasting time as I'm talking, but you can see how long this takes. This takes a long time. So imagine you're on a test. This can take up to 5 minutes, right? You can't wait till the end of the test to do your build. You have to time yourself. And what I'll do for you guys on your midterm test is I will tell you it's time to build, because you need to build at least more, like once or twice. Sometimes what you see inside the editor is not what happens in the build. There's some variation there, which means you need to make some adjustments in your code, as an example. And this is especially true if you're deploying to a device like iOS or an Android device, right? What you see is sometimes not what you get, and it's best to actually build the actual object or the game and see what happens. Especially true with VR. VR works great in the editor, doesn't work at all on the device. That's bad. That's really, really bad. So those kind of things can happen. Yeah.
Why do you choose WebGL over doing it as a PC file?
So why am I choosing PC? Why am I choosing WebGL over PC? Well, I'll tell you. For marking purposes, it's very simple for me to double-click on your game and make it work. If I had to download every single project that you guys have done for me, and then download it, open it, look at it, and whatever, there's a longer process involved. Here, I can just get your builds, and then if you look, there's an index.html file, and literally all I have to do is this. And then, sorry? Yes, but I also look at it on my Mac. I look at it from everywhere else, so I want to be able to do that. And notice how that didn't work, because unfortunately, for Chrome, it blocks it, but you can definitely open it up with something else. And usually there's a bit of a server happening on the background. If you're going to put this up on a server to view, like let's say for example Microsoft Azure, AWS, or even GitHub pages, you take these three folders, so build, template data, and index.html, and you put them up exactly this way up online, and basically you can just double click this and move. Now the reason why this isn't working is because I could be using something else like Firefox. So go to Open With, and let's look at Firefox, and then Firefox should work. No, not now. You can see that now it's going to work exactly how it would look. One thing that's really cool with WebGL is you can start playing it, and then you can maximize the screen, so that you can actually do one of these. Now here's the negative about WebGL. It does something like this sometimes, where this isn't really expanding to fit, and we'll talk about how to fix this problem now. Okay. So this is the kind of my first build. I'm not quite ready to deploy this one yet, but we've done it, we've tested it, it kind of works. One thing to note is that in your user interface, in your canvas, so again, I'm going to go into my scenes, go to my start scene, and if you look at the user interface, so here's my canvas, and if I look at the lives label and the score label, so here's my lives label, and notice that my anchors, so if I go here inside my anchors, they're kind of in the middle. If I press Alt, you can see that I can make it so that it's not numerically going to move. It's actually going to move according to this. I can kind of move to the top right. I can instantly move the score label. So here's my score label. And again, clicking this to the top right, top left. And then I can also move this down so numerically it's exact. So again, if I look at my lives label, you can see that my position is on the x-axis is 80, and my position on the y-axis is minus 15. So I want to move this down a little bit. So let's move this down to like minus, it looks like probably minus 30 might be good. And I'll do the same thing with this. So now I'm not just eyeballing it anymore. Like I said, I'm going to fix it so it's a little nicer. So here's my score. I'm going to move this down to like minus 30, like we said, so they're the same. I'm also going to push it in from the left. So again, right now my position on the x-axis is 80. I think 90 might be okay, maybe even bigger than that. There we go. And then again, this one, if I was going to look at my score label, that looks like minus 80, so I'm going to probably go to, I'm going to push that back to minus 60. Sorry, minus 100. Now why is it minus here, as an example, compared to this one? Like why, how does this work? So notice that this one has a top right corner anchor. So my anchor is top right corner. And this one, so that's like score label. And lives label, here's lives label, is also lives label is top left corner anchor. See that? So here's this one, top right corner, top left corner. If I go to start label is in the middle. That works okay. Right, start button is down here. Now this is a problem. I mean, it's going to appear here. It's going to be relative to the middle of the screen there. End label, same thing. That's okay. Restart button, same thing. Now, one thing to note is you want to make sure that your start label and end label are the same in terms of your Y positions. So again, start label, 83.8 on the Y position, end label roughly 83.8. Looks like the same. Let's just make it the same, 83.8. So minor adjustments to this whole thing. So we've got changes. Now if I go to the canvas, I have to apply all my overrides. And now this is going to look a little better for us, okay, from that perspective. So that's kind of a few small changes I wanted to make just from a UI perspective. I had very few. Okay, so we've done our build. Now we still have that problem, that finicky problem of the background, which I've been wanting to fix for a couple weeks, but I wanted to move on too. And we have a little bit of time today, so I'm going to try and do this. So one thing to note is that we have our top ocean and our bottom ocean. Okay, so remember I have two oceans here compared to what I've done in the past. So let's take a look at what these are. So top ocean and bottom ocean. So actually it's the other way around. Bottom ocean looks like it's coming up here and top ocean looks like it's over here. But it shouldn't matter. Basically the ocean that gets to the bottom first, so for example, once this ocean here gets to the bottom, then what I want it to do is it's going to snap the bottom ocean, whatever the ocean is in the bottom, on top of it. Not to a fixed position, but rather to the top of the other one. Okay? So this is where it gets a little hairy. You got to think about this. There's only one object, it's the ocean. But you have two instances of the same object, starting in different places. Right? So again, I could do things slightly differently. I could say that I have a bit of an offset. Like when it resets, I add a little bit more down. So it doesn't reset to that start position. It kind of brings it so there's a bit of an overlap. Right? The challenge with that is that it's going to be offset just a little bit, so it's going to create that little overlap again. Right? And it's going to keep on chasing is what it is, right? One thing is going to be a little bit lower than the other one. The other one's going to be a little lower than the other one, and it's going to keep happening forever and ever. It's just what's going to happen, right? So that's a bit of an issue. And so what happens is you get this separation. So when you run it, and again, even here in the scene, you can see what's happening. So when it resets, watch the reset. So look right where it's in here. So it resets, and then it resets kind of good, but sometimes what happens is you get a bit of separation right there. See that? So it's happening every other time. So one, and then as soon as it resets again, you get this bit of a reset, a bit of a gap. And it doesn't really matter about the speed of the ocean. So if I say like the vertical speed of the ocean is instead of 0.05, it's 0.04 or 0.03. There's going to be less separation. So again, if I go to top ocean and bottom ocean, instead of 0.05, I make it something smaller. We talked about this, 0.04. And then I see if this is the speed of the ocean, vertical speed. Remember, I also have to make sure that the island matches that, because that would look really weird. The island would drift, right? So that's something that I have to change. So this would also be 0.04, not 0.05. And then let's see what happens. So again, let's see if there's any difference in terms of our separation. And this will give us hints as to what's happening. So here, pretty good. And yet when we come to here, it goes a little bit lower, and that looks like it's okay. Take a look. So why? It's because of the way the frames work, the frame rate. So frames, what happens is it's going to move the ocean a particular clip. Now because we're not pixel perfect, right, what ends up happening is there's a bit of calculation, there's calculations that are happening for it to compress to, to this kind of setting, right? And what ends up happening is you get a little bit of loss, right? And so one of the solutions is, like I said, making it snap to the top. It's just trying to understand, you need references to the last ocean's position. Now you can use the game controller for this. So what you can do is you can say that, okay, ocean, I'm the last one, right? I've got to take control. So whenever the oceans need to know where they are before the reset happens. So before they're ready to reset, it's going to transfer the information. It's going to use the game controller as a go-between. It's going to hold that information on the game controller, and then the other ocean is going to look to see what the new snap position is. So it's not going to be a fixed value, but rather a floating value. Now this can present its own problems in terms of it's going to continue to float lower and lower, lower and lower until it finally snaps in the middle. You're going to see the reset happen in the middle of the screen, which is exactly what we wanted to avoid in the first place. Okay. So this is one of the fixes by slowing it down just a touch. So this looks pretty good now. That's one of the things I wanted to do. Okay, so what about high score? So I want to carry the high score over, right? Because this is kind of part of my build. How do I carry the high score over from one scene to the other? So here's the problem. The problem is everything is being kept on the game controller. But every single time I move from one scene to the other, the game controller is destroyed. Game controller is destroyed. So the only time I want to reset the game controller is when I want to reset the game. But between my main scene and my game over scene, I want the game controller to continue. I want the game controller to live, right? So there's something called don't destroy on load, or do not destroy on load. So if I go don't destroy on load, Unity, there's actually a little script that does this. Here's don't destroy on load. And the way it works is you put this little script in place when you're moving from one scene to the other. So here's an example of a class that's called scene swap. Here, right up in the Unity documentation. So I'm moving from, first I get the active scene. We know how to do that. We have whatever that scene is. And then what I want to do is I want to move to scene 2, whatever scene 2 is. Okay? But one thing I want to do is I want to mark something so that it doesn't destroy things on load. So here's don't destroy that script. So I attach this script, for example, and when I destroy this game object, right, it's going to say whatever the game object is, I don't want to destroy this game object before I move on. Don't destroy on load. And what don't destroy on load does is when the scene has changed, it's going to keep that script and that particular object. So why would I want to do this? Well, this is one way of transferring data from one scene to the other through the game controller. So the game controller is going to maintain all of its values, in-memory values, when it goes from one scene to the next. Now, another way to do it, of course, is to save the data somewhere, like on a text file or something like that. And you can do that through by using C#. But this is one way of doing it, by keeping the data in memory. Okay? So again, don't destroy on load, and whatever the game object you want to save is what you want to do. Okay, let's try this. So what this means, I'm just going to put it out there to you, is the end scene does not have its own game controller, but rather it uses the game controller that comes from the main scene. And the main scene, when it goes from one scene to the next, it doesn't destroy the game controller. If you're going to go from one scene to the next scene to the third scene, it keeps all that information. So you can always pass that information back to your player. For example, I'm playing a level and I don't finish, and it takes me to the end scene, right? But I want to capture things like the player's position, some things on the map, things that the player's picked up, the current state of the game, pretty much, right? I want to capture all that information somewhere, and then I want to transfer it over to the, so I can go back and play that scene again, exactly from where I left off, that last checkpoint, whatever it was. So again, a couple ways to do that. One, set up a checkpoint, save the game every time you get to a checkpoint, and then when you get back if you die, and you want to restart at a particular checkpoint, right? Then you load up the information of the entire game world, the way it was at that particular checkpoint, and then you know when the player is going to load, and then you have this come back up, so that way it resets the game exactly how you like. There's a little bit of work involved there, as you can imagine, especially if there was a large world. And one of the things to do is don't save the entire world, only save the changes, right? Because a lot of changes can happen. Imagine if you save the entire world again, like that could be like a lot of information, right? But if you only change save the changes, for example, you know, enemies that have died, and that kind of stuff, chests that have been opened, keys that have been dropped, you know, those kind of things, right? Then you're okay. So let me do this in terms of don't destroy unload. So I want to go back to my scenes, right? And I'm going to go back to my end scene. So save this one. So in my end scene, I also have a game controller, right? And I also have a canvas. So what I want to do, and this is where we have to start thinking about scripting a little bit differently. One is I want to make sure that all the overrides that I've done in my start scene. Let's go back to my start scene. So if there's any overrides from my game controller, I want to apply them all. Any overrides from my canvas, I want to apply them all, right? I want to apply all those things. And once I've applied those things, when I go back to my main or my end scene or whatever, I have that. So let's, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, instead of deleting it, because there's a risk involved, I'm just going to turn it off, right? We're just disabling it. I'm going to save this game controller here. And what I want to do is when I die, so that means in the main scene. So here's the main scene. And if I go back to the main scene, which is inside this main, and I'm going to go back to my game controller, or my player. Here's my player. Because my player controller is the thing that basically kills the scene, right? It says, hey, I've lost lives, I keep losing lives, send this information to the game controller. The game controller receives this information and says, oh, I'm ready to go to the next step. But one thing it has to do is, it's going to say this, before I move to the next scene, right, I want to do not destroy unload, or don't destroy unload. Going back to our documentation that's online, you can see this is exactly what they did here. So this is one script, and you can see that you're loading the stuff over here in this script, right? So again, you have two different objects, two different scenes, and like it says, the don't destroy unload script is attached to the background music, right, in this particular case. So here's my scene swap, and I'm going to go load scene. Depending on what I load a new scene, but what I don't want is my don't destroy unload to untag me. So notice this is objects, and it says if objects.length is greater than 1, then destroy this great game object, otherwise don't destroy this game object. Okay, we can use this same logic when it comes to our code too. So again, what I want to do is don't destroy this game object before I switch the scene, right? Let's try that first. So I say that, okay, I'm going to go to the end scene, but don't destroy unload this .game object. So why this .game object and not this? This represents the script. The script's parent is a game object where the script is attached to. So I'm saying, hey, don't destroy this game object when I die, ever. Okay? So let's see how this works. Does it even work? So again, I'm starting off my game. I'm going to go back into my scenes. I'm going to go back to my start scene, and I'm going to play. So the start scene's ready to go. I'm ready to play. Start. I'm playing. That's weird. And then I get this. So what ends up happening is it worked. Look what happened here. I have my end scene, right, with a game controller that's disabled, and then I have this, where I have everything together. I have this part, I have my game over, my restart button, there's probably everything in there too. Let's take a look at this thing here. Take a look what's happening here. When I bring this in, And this is what I talked about before. Yeah, it worked, but look at all the missing prefabs. There's missing stuff here, missing stuff here. Why is that? Because what we're doing is, and this is what's preventing us from doing this thing, what we're missing is references that are programming references. Without good programming references, for us just to drag and drop, what ends up happening is the game controller can't find the prefabs anymore because those have been destroyed. The prefabs have been eliminated, right? They're gone. So because the prefabs have been eliminated, then the game controller can't find them, and so you get this problem. How come all this stuff came up? The rest? Because of those errors. I have a lot of missing prefabs. I don't know what to do, and so this kind of stuff happens. So questions around that. So don't destroy and load as a way to keep any object. Now please don't tell me that you want to do this. Don't tell me that you want to keep the oceans, the bottom, like I want to keep all my objects and put them from one scene to the next. Otherwise, why change scenes? We change scenes because we want to do cleanup. We want to go to another level, right? Usually it's level design. From one scene to the other is totally different. And the only reason why we want to keep stuff from one scene to the next is because we want to transfer data. Transferring data, there's just one way of transferring the data, doing this way. The other way is saving and loading, which is like actually saving something on a physical file somewhere and then loading it up in the next scene. The only thing we really need to save is the high score and then loading it back up in this particular context. But what this is highlighted for us is that the game controller needs to be changed. Okay? If we don't change the game controller the way it's working right now, how we're dragging and dropping everything, then we're going to get this problem again. And again, I'll highlight it one more time for you. But one thing we notice also is that the island is moving too slow, 100%, right? You can actually see it in the first scene. So this looks okay, but inside of the main scene, you know, we forgot to change some of this stuff here, top ocean and bottom ocean. This should be 0.04. So this is the problem when you only change one thing. And by the way, what I could do is also make this information. I could update the prefabs in these things, and also the island has to be updated. So the island, you can see that that's been updated because I did that in the prefab itself. So the prefab is going to say 0.04, right? But I didn't update the top ocean and bottom ocean. So let's do that. So go to the prefab, update, bottom ocean, update, apply to all. So that's going to do that particular deal with that problem. But where it's a real issue is this. So I'm dying, right? And then here we are again, right? So again, take a look how it separates it. Unity does one of these. It says here's the end scene, and then here's don't destroy and load scene. Actually, it looks like it's almost like it's got its own scene. And the only thing it's got in there is this game controller thing. But the game controller is missing this. It doesn't know what clouds are. It knows this stuff because this stuff is inside of itself. I've dragged and dropped this stuff in there. It doesn't know what live label or score label is. It doesn't know start label or any of this stuff. And because it doesn't know this and it needs for me to drag and drop, it's got a bit of an issue. I can't turn stuff off that I can't access. So how do I fix it? I need to make references. So back to the drawing board. That's what I like to say. So here what I've done is I've created these objects. So a cloud object, an island object. And remember what I've done here. In my start, I've got a messy start. I want to start cleaning some of this up. For example, this switch itself needs to be extracted, and it needs to be scene configuration. That's what it's going to be. So let's do that now. So again, I'm going to select all this stuff here. Okay, there it is. And then I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to Quick Actions and Refactorings here in Visual Studio. And it's going to give me this extract method. It's going to tell me whatever this method is. I'm going to call this scene config. Right, I'm going to call it scene config. And scene config, it basically depends on what you load, it loads stuff up, right? Now you also can think about this. This is also kind of a scene config thing. This part. Active sound clip, whatever. Shouldn't this be part of my scene config? Shouldn't this be part of my scene config? How about all this? Shouldn't all that be a part of my scene configuration? Well, yeah, all of it should be there. It's all missed. So I'm going to take all of this again, things that I missed, even up to the island. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to put it at the bottom of scene config. Yay. So that's one. So that's my scene configuration. So now start has one simple function that takes care of everything else. Make sense? It's a little cleaner than what it was before, and it kind of talks about what this does. So start call scene config. Scene config is this, and then it does all the scene configuration to make sure we start. Okay. Next, I want to maybe before scene configuration, what I need to do is I need to do game object configuration. All my game object attachments, or initialization, if you will. So we're going to make a little function that does that. So I'll make another new function. We're going to call this game object initialization. I don't mind how long it is, but game object initialization is what I'm going to call before I do scene config. By the way, if you really want to be a stickler, then maybe you should rename this thing scene configuration. Just saying. If we're going to call this scene game object initialization, might as well call this scene configuration. Alright, so game object initialization is happening before scene configuration. Why? Because we want to basically connect to any of the game objects programmatically, as opposed to letting them be dragged and dropped. That's what we wanted to happen, right? So I need to find some of these objects. So there's a couple ways to find them. One, find objects. Okay, I want to find objects with tag. I can do that. Find object with tag. That's one thing. Find object with name. I can do that too, right? So how does this work? So I can say game object dot find, or if I start typing find, so game object with a capital G, game object dot find, you can see find objects with tag, multiple objects. I could find object with tag, one object. Find object of type. Right, so those find with tag, it returns one active game object tag, returns null if no object was found. So that's one thing I could do. So I could use this kind of thing. So find object with tag, this is okay, but what about just find object? So if I just did find actually is a thing that exists too, and you can see find and there's a string name, whatever the name of the object is. Finds a game object by name and returns it. So that might be my best choice, right? But remember, there's certain things I can't find by name. Clones of objects. I'd have to add clone to the end of it if I was finding one of the objects that are in the scene, right? But some of the stuff that already exists, I can find. For example, I know that in my canvas, right, there's going to be a couple of objects. One of them that's called lives label, and if you click on these things, that's the name, lives label, score label, star, you know, all these things, right? One thing I could also do is I can also tag these as UI items, right? Notice there's tags for some other stuff here. I can make it, instead of untagged, I can tag all these things, and I can find with tag, lives label, score label, start button, end label, reset. I can do all those stuff, right? Or by name, one of the two. So let's start doing it by name. So if I find, I want to return whatever I'm finding by name. So again, let's look at the stuff that I need. I need to have the cloud and island object. That has to be there. But these objects, cloud and island, are actually prefabs. So again, going back to our scripting API, reference prefab in script, because that's what you need to do. So again, I want to instantiate prefabs at runtime, right? So not in design time. So again, what I want to do is I have to have my prefab, whatever that is. It says drag a prefab onto this field and instantiate it, right? That's one thing you can do. So that's common scenarios. What about if I want to run the prefab as an example without dragging and dropping like this? I want to be able to build the prefab. This gives you an example of doing that. Here's a circle formation. It's a neat little tutorial. But I want to instantiate a prefab as an example by script. So I want to kind of get a reference to prefab by script. So how do I do that? This isn't the answer. So again, instantiating prefab without dragging prefab in the game script, right? Or another one is, how can I reference a prefab script in a game object found in your assets, right? So this is one of those questions, and they have a bit of an answer. They say you can export your prefabs to asset bundles and call your prefabs through there. See character customization. So this is a very old answer, 2010. That's not how we do it anymore. Neat idea though, asset bundles. Okay, so what else? Anyone know how to do it? Using a script editor to get prefab reference from name. 2017. So again, and it says here's the answer, found this answer in the Unity Answers database. So how do you do it? Object prefab. Okay, again, it looks like 2016 asset database, load assets, add path, assets/game object.prefab. It's pretty ugly, wouldn't you say? Type of game object. But this is one way of doing it because we need to have a reference to this thing, right? Again, going back to our game controller, right? I'm just going to go back to this for a second. So far, we've got nothing, right? So I'm not changing the find, for example. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. Let's see what we're missing again. Let's go back to this. So again, if I go back, let's make sure we don't overkill. So again, we're going to go back. We're running, die. And then what's missing? Am I missing my prefabs for cloud and island? No. So we don't have to worry about this. We're missing stuff that's in the scene, right? So missing cloud game objects, missing game object, missing game object. Look, here's this, and it says my clouds, well, I'm missing those. I got references to these, but I'm missing these. And I'm not missing these, but I'm missing these. So these ones, this should actually happen automatically. This is actually what's happening. I've got 3 references to it, and I'm instantiating 3 objects in my game, right? And so I should have these 3 objects that are instantiated. So that's an issue. But we don't need to do the actual prefab. We do need to do the other ones. So let's do the other initializations. So again, let's start off at the top. We got these 2. Number of clouds we've got. This we're going to have. A list of game object types we're going to have. Audio sources we have. Live label we don't have. Score label we don't have. Let's do those first. And we'll do them one at a time. So score label and live label. So live label, we want to say that we want to find, so again, it's game object, this is the long form, dot find, and then the name of the label, which is live label. It's got to be the exact name of the label though, right? And notice what it says. It says live label, it's a text field, and you're trying to get a reference to this object, right? And find returns a game object. Live's label is not a game object, it's a special type of game object. It's a text. As text. That's what I want to do, right? I want to be able to cast this object as a text object. And it says cannot convert type Unity game object to Unity type Unity text via reference conversion, boxing conversion, unboxing conversion. It won't work. It says you need to do it some other way. Does that make sense? It's not a game object. It's a text. So these ones we'll come back to because that's more difficult to do, which I knew they were going to be. But these other ones, so these ones I'm having a problem with, but these ones are all game objects, so we're good to go. All of these are good. Okay? So how do we control these ones? So start label, start button, end label, and restart button, we can do those. So again, start label, right? Again, what we want to do is we want to find, and in brackets, right, just the find itself, and the name of the object we wish to find, which is start label. That's what I want, okay? And it's going to be game object dot find. Okay, so notice that doesn't give us an error at all, right? So start label, we'll go end label. You know, these ones are good. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at just the ones we put in, and does it resolve those issues? Start label, end label, and we also have start button and restart button. So let's say start button. And restart button. Okay? So if this is true, I'm getting the references manually. That's what's happening here. Okay? This is what should be happening in here. Right? That's why we're making it game object initialization in the first place. Right? So I'm initializing this stuff like this. I'm making references. That's what I'm doing here. Linking references. Okay, cool. Let's try this out, and let's see what we get now. It doesn't mess me up. Take a look at this. So these are all good. I've already done that. But now we get to this. So that, kind of none of that worked. So again, we have those canvas. And here they are. They're live label, score label, start button, start label, start button. These are all there, right? End label, right? We have all these there. These are all physically in the scene, but we're not getting references to them. So what's a quick way to fix this problem? Well, one way we can do it, if we go back to our end scene for a second, this is the problem that we're having, right? First of all, we're not finding the game object. That's just a fact. We're not finding it. Okay. So the other reason why it's not happening is because the stuff that's happening in the scene in Game Controller, because I'm doing it manually in here, it's overriding the stuff that I'm doing with code, right? Remember that anything I'm doing here physically inside of my in the Unity scene always gets overwritten. It overwrites the code, whatever the value is here, right? Which makes sense, because if I make a change in my editor, it's supposed to override the code, right? I'm kind of going backwards here compared to what I did before. So what I'd have to do first is get rid of all these references, right? So again, one of the ways to test this is in the start scene, because it doesn't matter which scene you're testing in, these ones will just appear. So I'm going to go back to scenes, start, and go back to my game object, my game controller, and get rid of all these references. So I'm just going to literally get rid of them. And let's see if they populate. If we can make these populate with code, then I can make the other ones populate with code. So again, if I run, does it populate? It does. Huh? Isn't that nice? Still works, just by doing repopulation right here. So this is good. So this is interesting. The clouds didn't they didn't keep, right? So when I went from one thing to the other. Okay, so if that's true, let's see if I can do the same thing in my main scene. So main scene, this is where the game controller lives as well. I want to get rid of all this. Here we go. No, none of these. And I want my main scene to populate this stuff too, by code. So I'm actually making references like through my initialization. Alright, so going back, save the scene, going back to start, and then make it run. Cool, I'm clicking start, and let's take a look at my... Oh, didn't have a chance to. That's what happened. Restart.
Yay.
So
Lines are acting really weird.
it is, isn't it? And this is something else that happens. Take a look at this.
Yay.
I have like two game controllers in the scene. This one,
Yay.
and I have this one, right? So this one here, game controller number 1, has everything in here. But when I go to the last scene, it goes back down here. And now I have don't destroy on load, and I have two game controllers. Game controller 1 and game controller 2. By the way, if I keep doing this, wait for it. I've got 3 controllers that I've got now, right? See that? And it's going to keep going up and up. Why is that? Because the game, this scene here, which is my my main scene, it inherited the game. It actually has a game controller in the scene itself. So again, to fix this, going back to main, I got to take the game controller and undo that one too. And in my save that, and in my start scene, where the first game controller lives, we're never going to get back to start anymore. Start's never going to happen, right? We're going to move from one scene to the other, and it's going to happen through my my button when I press the start button. And that might be the easier transition to make. If we can make that transition happen, we can make the end transition happen. Alright, so again, if I'm going to go back to start, you can see that I have a button, and the button is called the start button, right? That calls the game controller script on start button click. We talked about this. On start and button click, right? What the on start button click will do is it will, before it loads main, it's going to say don't destroy on load this .game object. So that is where it happens, not here. Because this is when the characters, when your player dies, but you don't want to keep this one. You want to keep one that's perpetual from one scene to the next, and it's going to start in your start scene. So again, we're going to take this one out. This way, at least when you end, you'll never get a new one. You're just going to get the same one that you had when you entered. Okay? So that's the first thing. So let's go back to our start scene. This is start, and we're going to run it. Now remember, if I click this button, it's not going to destroy the game controller. It's going to pass it over into the new scene. Right? So let's try this. Start. And then now let's pause for a second. Alright, so what's missing? So again, we don't have, in the don't destroy on load part, we have a game controller. Here it is. What we don't have inside here is we don't have this game controller active. And we're missing all this stuff. Right? Because it's not finding the scene information. It's not finding the stuff that's inside the scene. It's not finding the top ocean, or it's not finding the canvas at all. In fact, it's not even finding the UI controls in the canvas. It's like the canvas doesn't exist. So, what's the next step? Well, it's like it's treating these two things, this part and this part, as separate scenes altogether. That's what's happening, right? Here's one thing I know. My player object is something that does not need to persist. But it's like I have to make my canvas persist, and I already have it as a prefab. So it'd be nice if not only did I make don't destroy unload on my game controller, but don't destroy unload my canvas either. Right? Keep that there. Those two things. Let's see if that's going to make a difference. It may, but this is one part of our learning journey, if you will. All right. Let's try that out. So again, going back to the start scene. So here's my game controller. Now we have to find the canvas. Here's the canvas. We have to get a reference to the canvas and all of its objects in order for it not to die, if you will. Because the canvas itself has all of these objects underneath it. Okay? All these objects. So this is part of the prefab. So I want this prefab to live. Now, there's a couple ways we could do this, right? Because the canvas is on right here, right? The other problem is that the canvas, here's one problem that's going to happen. The start button itself depends on the game controller, which is right here, right? It depends on this game controller, which is going to be on, but non-existent when it goes to the next scene. So that's going to cause a conflict. You won't be able to click on the next button anymore because there's not going to be a game controller to click on, which is going to be an issue. Alright, so that's an issue. That's why the canvas needs to live somehow. In order for the canvas to live, we need to get a reference to it. Again, I can get a reference to the canvas by calling it canvas. So back in our game controller code, so inside of this initialization part, we want to get a reference to the canvas. So here on the top, again, I've got my UI control. The first thing I probably want is a canvas. Just put it at the bottom for now. Public canvas. We're going to call this canvas. And we're going to say that the canvas itself is a game object. That's what it is. .find, which is going to be called canvas. By the way, we can also tag it. One thing to note is because canvas, I've made a canvas, not a game object like this. That's a mistake. Should be a game object, otherwise you'll have problems doing this. So now that I've got the canvas and I've got these things, I want to say that when I move from one scene to the next, on start button click, I want also don't destroy and load the canvas. Don't destroy, unload canvas. And you're going to see how complex this can get. So canvas is not going to be destroyed either. Yay. Alright, let's try it again, see what happens. So again, we're starting off. Right, we're going to have canvas and the game control persist. Start. Okay, so here's the canvas. It's got all these items. These things are disabled. This is a good solution, right? But the game controller, does it have access to everything? Mostly. Look what's missing. It has these things. It has the live label and score label, but they're not disabled. And what's also happening is it's missing all these game objects. But for the most part, we survived the cut, right? We have our plane. Can I move them? You can move the plane, but the cloud and the island didn't get instantiated. It's pretty good. And so moving the canvas over really helped, like super helped, because it did all this work. Look, for us. But, for me to move the canvas over, I have to make sure I disable the other canvas inside the scene. So, save this, and go back to the scenes, go back to main, and we're just going to disable this canvas here, because we only need one canvas, not two of them, right? And just to be clear, let's go do the same thing to the end. So again, we're going to disable this one on the end scene, because we only need one canvas from here to there, and go back to start. And now we should be able to see one scene, one canvas. This is good. Now we're almost there. Mail pilot and start button is still around, which we don't want it to be around. The end label is disabled. The start label exists, right? And in the game controller, you can see that I have access to start label, start button, end label, restart button, and canvas, right in here. I'm missing these prefabs, which we're going to fix. And in my main scene, I've got my canvas and my game controller disabled. Okay, so now when I move, I can see that I can move no problem. But what if I click the start button again? Can I click the start button again? Well, it's active, so of course I can. I'm going to just do this again. And again. And again. And again. And I can't let that ever happen, right? Because it's going to keep on resetting the scene. Okay? So one thing I need to do is get rid of this and somehow populate the rest of this. In my console, I'm not getting any errors, notice, which is kind of funny since things aren't working. But what's going on here? My clouds. How am I getting references to these clouds? Well, I'm kind of generating them. I'm instantiating those clouds. But it looks like the instantiation part, it's not working pretty good at all, in fact. I'm getting there, we're close. But this is not what's happening. So let's go back up here and see what's going on with the instantiation. So here, again, I initialize objects that I need. I scene configuration stuff, which is all this. And then when we go back down, as we scroll down, I'm setting up a new list of game objects, and then I'm adding game objects as I instantiate clouds. So this instantiation step is not working. Do you see that? Yes? It's a problem, right? It's a real problem. So it's a whole pile of work is what I'm saying. Whole pile of work to troubleshoot this stuff. And I'm passing like a bunch of game objects, which just right there from that perspective is a bad thing. So what could I do, knowing that we can still pass stuff from one scene to the next? What can I do to keep information? Right? That's all I want to do. I want to just pass information. That's my real scope of all this, to get the game over thing working. Right? What can I do? Well, we know we pass information through game objects that persist. Right? Because look, I'm able to persist my game object from one scene to the other. That I can do. Right? But I'm having problem instantiating. When I'm instantiating, it's not working. Right? I can't instantiate, I got no clouds. If I can't instantiate and I can't make an island, I have no motion. And it looks really bad that I can't get rid of and in fact, even scene detection, like this whole thing, seems to be partially dysfunctional. Right? Like for example, my end label and my restart button is inactive. But when I move to main, it still shows my start button and my start label. Why? It doesn't see it that I've moved on to main, because I'm doing everything inside of my game object. It can't tell that my scene has moved on, because for it's never moved on. Yeah.
Since we're using the same game object, so you're not going into start again, so all the initialization
is never happening because I'm only doing it once, right? So that's part of it. So it means that all this initialization step, so game initialization, this start stuff, is never happening. It's never ever happening. It's only happening once. So I move to the new scene, I need to do this initialization and scene configuration again. So I need to initialize this as well as scene configure, right? That's an issue. And again, scene configuration is only going to happen one time, right? Not when the scene loads. So that means that it's got to be called somewhere when the scene loads. So on scene load somehow. Is there such a function? So again, we go back to our Unity lifecycle stuff. On scene load, Unity. It's called actually on, here's the scene manager. I want to use on scene loaded, right? The scene manager has got a lot of different functionality built into it. So scene loaded, on enable, right? You can see that there's some stuff that scene manager has for in the scripting API. So what scene loaded does, it says use a subscription of either Unity action scene or a method that takes a scene and a load scene mode, right? And what it does is it starts to detect, plus equals, by the way, is an event handling method when an on enable is called. So we need to kind of do it so that when the scene loads, right, it starts generating this event, right? So when the scene loads, so before I call load the scene, it's got to wait, and when the scene loads, then it does something. Let's take a look at other options. So again, scene managers is I can get the active scene. What else can I do with scene manager? So scene manager dot. So if I say, now there is no on, so that doesn't do it. But there are little lightning bolts, and lightning bolts are things like this: active scene changed. When the active scene is changed, then you can trigger us to go back and do scene configuration again. Right? That's what we really want to do. Right? We can load scene, we can merge scene, we can count how many scenes, we can see when the scene is loaded or unloaded, right? Those kind of things we can do. So active scene changed. So it says events, unity, scene, active scene changed. So when the active scene changed, what we have to do is we have to describe how we attach it to a delegate, and that's very challenging to do. Do you guys know delegates? Yes. You should have known. You should have figured if you've taken COMP305, you should know delegates, right? You should have been told delegates, taught delegates. Yes. How about Josh? Josh, were you taught delegates in COMP305?
Sorry?
Delegates, COMP305. C#.
Sounds familiar, except I'm really bad with terminology. I'm really good at applying it.
Anybody else?
Was that programming 2?
2. Yeah. So again, using the active scene changed, it's going to show you that it's going to use a delegate most likely. So let's take a look. So if I go active scene changed, so unity active scene changed, it's an event, and it's going to show you that you create. See, it says use a subscription of either unity action or a method that takes 2 scene type arguments. Alright, so let's take a look what it gives us. So here's a script example. So here's the delegate, like I talked about before. And a delegate, what it does is it says it's called this delegate change. Okay? So the way delegates work is basically what you're going to do is you're going to say that when the active scene changed, scene manager, active scene changed, then you're going to add changed active scene, right? And changed active scene is an event, is a method that takes 2 scene events, the current scene and the next scene. This is how it works. Just like it says up here. So it says you can use a subscription or a unity action or a method that takes 2 scene type arguments. Right? There it is. Scene 1, scene 2. And then what you're going to say is the current name is whatever the current name is, right? If the current name is equal to null, then you can change the current name, and then that's how that works, right? But what ends up happening is change scene is the event. So this is the change scene event. Okay? So go back. Change active scene. And then what we do is they start a coroutine, like it's very complex. So what can we do to mitigate the complexity? Because I want to move on with my life, right? This is going to take time. I could do this, but it takes time. It's difficult to do. It's not detecting things properly. Even if you want to do the thing you're talking about, it'll never hit awake more than once, or start more than once, ever, right? And we need to be able to call this scene separately if we want to make change scenes. So we could say, don't not destroy unload this game controller. Yeah.
I thought I saw another one that says when you was talking about the lightning bolt that said scene when a scene is loaded.
Sure. The problem is, let's try that one. So
when it is going from start to main, it is loading another scene.
Sure.
Right?
One scene loaded. So let's go back to that one. So again, it's like scene manager dot scene count, scene loaded, right? Scene manager scene loaded. So we're going to say scene loaded.
I'm still using that like that.
And here we go. It's exactly the same thing. But it says use subscription of either a unity action scene mode or a method that takes the scene and a load scene mode. So going back, you can see it's going to do the same thing here. On scene loaded, here's the scene mode, whatever that scene mode is. And you can see that we're using this. This plus equals is basically, this is the event, and then it's pointing to on scene loaded. And then we say, okay, when the scene, whatever the scene is, loads, show me the scene name. And if something loaded, we can make it really simple. Anything loads, as an example, then we can generate the event. And then on scene loaded is something that's going to run. It's going to be a custom event that we're listening for. That's what we're doing. Okay. So then instead of it working the way it is, we can basically notice it says like on enable, on disable, right? On enable is called first when the game is loaded. When the first game is loaded, we actually create an event that's on scene loaded, which is this event, which we create. It's a custom event that we create, and what we're saying is when it happens, every time that event happens, it's going to trigger an action, which is going to cause our scene configuration. Phew. Let's try it. I think it's a little overkill, in my opinion, but that's just me. That may just be me. So where do we do this? First of all, we're going to do this like in another event. So start is an event, and just before start happens, we're going to go void on enable. So this is when the game starts. Okay. Enable happens. It's a lifecycle event, right? And then what we want to do is we want to create this scene manager, scene loaded, and we're going to make another event that triggers when the scene loads. So, by the way, we can use the other one too. Scene changed. When the scene changes, every time the scene changes, do the configuration. Very simple. Same thing. But let's try it. So we'll say scene manager dot, and again, so this is active scene changed, and you need two scenes, scene 1 and scene 2, or when the scene is loaded. Okay? It doesn't care what scene is loaded, any scene loads. Whenever any scene loads, you know, then we're good to go. When scene loaded, then we say plus equals to, we make a, notice there's we have to use a delegate, right, to insert something in there. So for example, now, here's the, whatever the scene loaded is called, scene manager scene loaded. We're going to rename this on scene loaded, right? And there's two scenes, scene 1 and scene 2, or current and next. Current and next, doesn't matter what we call them. And then it gives us this not implemented exception because basically it says, hey, you have to fill this in. That's what this means. So here's my filling it in. I'm going to call, instead of it being configured here, game object initialization and scene configuration, game object configuration has to happen and scene configuration has to happen every single time a new scene is loaded. So I'm going to cut these out and put them in here. Okay. Let's see this fail. I'm just saying, it's a neat idea, but
we had to do it.
no, we're doing it. We're doing it. You said it. It's good learnings anyway. No matter what we do here, it's all learnings. Now there's another solution here, okay? But if we want to go through these hard steps, we'll do it. Let's go. All right, so we're going to run it. So we're good, right? I click start, and we're good. This worked. However, we're still missing stuff. It says object reference not set to an instance of an object, which means we're still missing some references. None, end label, and restart label is not an object. We're missing these things, right? So configuration kind of worked. We're in the main scene, right? I can move my plane around, right? But I got no objects to instantiate. Object instantiation failed inside a game controller where it's been loaded. It won't work. It's almost like we need a coroutine. And to me, this is, like I said, way overkill. This is cool. We learned some stuff. We learned that we can do this stuff. We can use our own custom event, right? And when I want to move from one scene to the other, it's going to work fine. One thing that did happen was it followed the instructions we told it, which was turn off the labels and everything else. But it didn't turn back on the labels. We don't have, like, you know, the other stuff because we're missing them. So again, way overkill, in my opinion. So what else could we do? Well, we know that the game controller is critical. It's the one thing that instantiates everything else. And we can't muck with it, right? We can't, like, try and get it to instantiate stuff and those things. But what if, and this is where we come down to the reasons why we separate stuff. What if we had a separate scoreboard? A scoreboard that has nothing to do with you know, UI or anything else, but that has everything to do with data carrying. I want to use a game object, a scoreboard, to carry data from one scene to the other, but nothing else. Everything else gets reinstantiated. You know, the hierarchy gets back together. The game controller, you know, kind of stops. But it uses this object called scoreboard that starts in the start method and starts collecting data and carrying data forward into the other methods. So that's the other option. Make sense? So that way, we don't have to find objects. We don't have to do any of those things. You know, I mean, still we want to do this anyway. It's the right thing to do, right? But you know, we don't want to don't destroy and load any of the main controllers. Let's put some stuff back. That's why I didn't delete it. I commented it out because I knew it was coming. But it's an interesting study because it's some advanced stuff that some of you may not know. So going back to main, I'm going to just put these back. Right? I'm going to put the canvas back too. I'm going to go back to end. I'm going to put these two things back. So these are back. And I just want to make sure that these are all gone. Right? I also don't need a reference to the canvas anymore, so in my game controller I'm going to delete it, because that was just something, that's why I put it aside, because I knew I wasn't going to need it. And because of that, then in my scene configuration, which is up here, I don't need to do this. Just going to set this back the way it was. We're going to make it work again first, and then we're going to put it back to, we're going to break it and then make it again. Don't need this anymore. Definitely don't want to use unenable. Is, I avoid it like the plague. Bad things can happen if you don't do it right. Right? So, you know, for very simple things, very simple projects anyway. Okay, so now, when it looks like this, I think we're good. Making sure that things are okay. Canvas, yeah, we don't want to don't destroy and load. We don't want to don't destroy and load anything. So none of this stuff. Cool. Back in business. We should have all this. Clouds size 3. And we should be able to start on the start. Save. And we should be able to play the whole game just like it was without loss. Let's try this out. That's, I mean, those are the changes we made, right? Start. You can see that this works. Bit of a delay there. That was a little bit disturbing.
It's still messing up those lives.
Yay.
The lives are still funky.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, after hitting like 1, it went to -1. It went 5, -1, 3.
Oh, that's because I hit multiple clouds. See?
But shouldn't it kill you after less than or equal to 0?
No, it's not 0. It should be less than or equal to 1. So that was a bug.
Oh yeah.
So that should be inside of our area here. Instead of less than 0, it should be less than 1.
But 0 would, I mean, I guess it depends what you want to do.
Yeah, so once it goes less than 1, anything less than 1, it should automatically go. Because if it's equal to 0, that's bad. It should just be less than 1. Right? So that would do it. And the reason why it's going to 0, we're seeing 0 at all, is because you're hitting multiple clouds at the same time that are eating your health right away. Right? And so if it goes anything less than 1, it should just disappear. Let's try that again.
It did it again though.
Yeah. But this is okay. At least we're getting the same thing.
Yay.
There. So it's like before it gets reset, this is what happens. Before it gets reset, it actually does this. Right? So we should actually put this part here instead of an else. So the only way it's going to do that if lives, this will never happen now. Because the only time this is going to happen, this happens every time, the way we had it. Now this is only going to happen when it's not this. Okay, let's try this again. That's just a bug. That bug's been there from the beginning. See?
It still did -1.
Oh, it did. Where?
Yeah, it did. Press restart.
Alright, what are you talking about? Where's -1?
In the line. It's still saying -1.
No, it's saying 0.
Yeah, it does, but it's still, it goes 5, -1.
That's 4.
You didn't, I saw -1.
Yeah,
No, man.
That's the font's 4.
4. That's 4.
But then it's like cutting off.
No, it's 4. That's the font. Sorry, you actually made me fix another bug, but that's not that one. That's it doesn't say -1. It says 4. That's 4. That's the 4. That's the 4 glyph. That's the 4 glyph. Yeah, no, it looks like it's got a bit of a separation, so it looks like 4. Yeah, in this case, because this is the last thing. Because remember we talked about this. The game controller, right, moves the top and bottom motions, and the top and bottom motions is 4, right, 0.04. The island should not be moving at 4. It should be not moving at anything greater than 4, which is 4 right here. So I'm not sure why that is. What's happening? Shouldn't. They should be moving at the same speed. Yeah, well, no, it's me. It's not Unity. That's my issue. Here. Cloud is 5. Island is 4. Ocean is also 4. That should work properly. Anyways. So now, like I said, what if we had this other object and all it did was hold data? That's all we use it for, right? This is the final push, guys. So, again, what I want to do is I want to go into my start scene. And in my start scene, I want to make another object, an empty object, and all it's going to be is like a score container, whatever you want to call it. And the score container is going to have 2 values. Actually, 1 value, just score. And we're going to store our score in the score container, right? Whatever the score is. Huh?
Score.
Yeah. And what this will do, right, is when we store it, every time it changes, we'll store it in the score container, right? We could also call it the high score container, whatever you want it. The high score container will contain the high score and move it forward and live throughout all the scenes, right? So as soon as what it's going to do is going to say, okay, hey, when the score, right, is greater than me, replace my value with the score's value. Make sense? No problem. So let's make a new object. Make a new object, create empty. We'll call this the score container. Score container. Actually, we'll call it high score. How about that? This high score object. So the high score object is going to have 1 value, which is going to be in the script. I can't do it right now. I'll be there soon. So again, we're going to make a new script. Create C# script. Call this the high score script, which will attach to the high score object. There we go. And what we want to do is we want to expose. Now, a couple of options here. We can make this script public static if we want to, which means that if we make it static, it's going to live, right? We just have to access it. The other thing we can do is we want to make this not destroyed. Whatever we don't want to do, we don't want this thing to be destroyed. So we can try and use don't destroy on load, right, for this object and see what happens. So this is the tactic we're kind of trying to use. So again, we're going to have some values. They're going to be public and static, and the only value we're going to really have is the actual value. So high score value. Call it score. No, score. Which is going to be of type integer. Okay? Do I need any of this? No. It's literally going to be just a container like this. Alright? And it's going to be public and static, which means I don't have to instantiate it. I'm also going to system.serialize just to make sure that I have access to it everywhere. Right? So this high score score, you know, is going to hold my score that I have for my high score. Okay. When I move scenes, which is going to be inside of my game controller, the one scene I'm not going to change is that object, and I need to get a reference to that object. So I'm just going to call this. This would be under the score object. We'll leave some space here, and we'll say. See, this is where we get a little funky. We're going to do it once, and then I want to get reference to it. I need to find the reference. So public, we're going to get this thing. We're going to call it high score. So we're going to high score. And what we want to do is inside of our initialization, high score is equal to game object dot find high score. And of course we did it wrong. I did it wrong. There should be game objects. So game object high score, and I want to get a script that's related to it. Yeah. So I find it, but now the high score is got a value. Does it have a value? Let's see. Because that's the one I don't want to just try and load. So I want to say that high score dot, yeah. Don't destroy on load high score, and let's see what happens. I'm not doing anything with the high score right now. I'm just gonna make sure it works throughout the entire time. Can I access it? Is the question. So let's see. And it won't disrupt anything else. So here we are, we're good, and we go to the next level, and we have this thing where we have our islands.
Yay.
Whoa.
Yay. Yay. Yay.
Sorry guys.
Yay.
No reference accepted. Okay, so basically it's not able to find it. Doesn't exist on this one. Here's my high score, and it didn't find it for some reason or another. So let's take a look at that game controller. Yeah, so he is trying to find it, but it won't fill it in. See where it says none? It's called high score. Here it is, high score, and then I can't make the connection here for some reason or another. Why would that be?
The node destroy, it should be in the on step. Restart, but it destroys whenever I use it.
Yes. Thank you. Alright, so let's try that again. Let's check this. Let's check that the game controller has a reference to it. It does. This is good. Alright, now if I click start, high score does exist.
Yay.
And it does exist in the end. So it does exist, and I have a value. Alright, cool. So now let's go to the high score value. We made it public and static. Let's get rid of static for a second so I can see it. High score should show it there. Yep, there it is. And then what I want to do is I want to set that high score to something, whatever I want it to be. So what I want it to do is in the game controller, if the high score, because I have a reference to it. First of all, let's see what happens if do I still have a reference to it in the second scene. If I don't have a reference to it in the second scene, none of this is going to work. So again, go on, start it, pause it. Do I have a reference to it in the second scene? So it's there, but in the second scene, do I have a reference to it? I do. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Now that I have a reference to it, I can access it. Which means that this, in my game controller, when I add score, which is here, right? So lives, and then score, I'm going to check it. I'm going to say that if high score is less than this one, or this is greater than that one, then replace. Let's do that. So we'll say that if high score, what do I have? I have reference to it, right? High score dot score dot score. What did I call it? High score public int. Do I have to system.serialize this too? Why? Yeah, high score dot. So it should be here. I'm not seeing it as an object. Well, good. We're getting closer. So this gets initialized. High score public, and if I've already system.serialized, that's where I can see it. And if I make it part of the, so my game controller right now is not inside the util namespace, right? And if I do make it into util namespace, I'll be able to see it. But yeah, that should totally see that. High score. Do you see that? Like high score, got a score value, score this one, right? But it just doesn't see what that is, so I can't access it. See? I wonder if I made it the other way around. So what if I made it, going back to what I did, which was static. I don't have to instantiate it this way at all. And if I did that, then I should be able to see it. It doesn't work. That is really weird. So I can instantiate anything. I can reference anything. Yeah. That is correct. So it's the game object, high score, find, I can get, so I know what to do. So I can say that you're correct. Let me take that back. Take that back. Good for you. You're going to save me time and heartache, right? So high score, that's the game object dot get component, and then it's going to be the high score component. Get component high score. Try it again. High score dot get component high score dot, and then right, and I'm going to save this as the high score object, but no, I like to use the angles. I think the angle brackets might be better. High score nope. Get components. Guys, if you guys want to go, don't worry. I'm still recording it. Take care. System type. Now, I'm pretty sure if you put get component, that'll do it. But get component high score. Let's do that. What was that? Like this. You're saying high score. There we go. So this, if this, syntax, if this is less than underscore score, if that's true, then I want to make this equal to score, right? And that should assign the value. Every time I assign a score, it should do it. Okay, let's try it. This will be it. An error? Does it say high score cannot be accessed with an instance reference? Qualify it with the type name instead. So I think what you're saying is var can I do that? Nice high score. No. Nope. Yeah, it doesn't like this. It doesn't like high score because it's an object that so it's not going to run. So we're close. We just need to do something different there. So if this would work, then if I was to run this, and if it didn't have errors like this, then it would work exactly how we want. And we can't use an instance reference. What if then it was a static, like we said? Static. Can I do it now? No, because it's still giving me the same thing. It says high score cannot be accessed with an instance reference. Qualify it with a type name instead. Type name instead. So in other words, convert it. Let's see what it means. Yeah, it definitely didn't like that. Okay, we're close. Just we just have to get to the point where. So what if I just did high score? High score dot score, and that might do it. So that would, because it's a thing anyway. It's a static anyway. This might have to be the way that we do it. High score dot score less than score. It's equal to score. That looks like it's okay, but then why do we have a reference to it anyway? Well, because we're keeping it. All right. Does it go away? It does. Kind of. The only thing is we can't see it. So what I'm going to do, because we can't see what that value is, because it's unless can I system.serialize it or serialize field? Let's see. I don't think I can. I don't think that will work. I think it won't work on statics. No. And so what if I just printed it out? So whenever it changes, just to see what it is for now, before I mess up something else, debug.log highscore.score. And we don't need to serialize it, because serializing it obviously is not going to do anything there. So do that and run it, and we should be close to getting it done. Start. Let's get some points.
Yay.
Okay. Let's restart. This is the whole point of this. I'm playing with a half screen too, which is really terrible. That was really unlucky.
Yay.
200.
Yay.
300. Looks like it's working. It's persisting, right? That's the thing.
Yay.
Can't get beyond 200.
Yay. Yay. Yay.
400.
Yay.
500.
Yay.
Okay, that was a cheat. 700. So it's working, because look, it's keeping my score, which is good. This is what we need. Okay, so now that this is working, man, oh man, craziness. So what we want to do now is, now that this is working, we want to create another label that's inside of. I'm not going to make you guys wait. But what we would do is we would make a label that is going to be shown inside of our canvas on the end screen only that shows high score, that's going to read the high score from the high score label, and we're good to go. That's how you do it. And we're just carrying one piece of information at a time. Thank you for your help. So yeah, I'll do it while you guys go. If you want to stay, you can, but I think it's time for everybody. For the people who aren't here, who are leaving, remember that next week, just to end off with you guys, that there's going to be your assignment 1 is due by next week, right? Make sure that's you're working on that. I know some of you can't work on it until later on this week. That's fine, but for people who are done, yay. For people who are not done, again, what I said to some people was it takes about 6 to 12 hours to get this thing done because of just some of the paperwork that needs to be done. There is some of the things I'm asking for a build, a WebGL build, and all that kind of stuff. Make sure you have all the things that I'm asking for, or you'll lose marks. Okay. Otherwise, any questions? I'll put up the solution. I'm going to stop recording, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a label, and you'll have the solution for next week. Okay. Thanks.